Do you want to know more about Lightning and JavaScript in Salesforce? In this Part 2 video from 2018, Zayne Turner will continue covering the elements of Lightning and JavaScript we ended with in Part 1 of this series to support your growth as a developer or architect. Welcome, it's Rachel and Jessica from 100 Days of Trailhead, the place where the tech community comes to learn Salesforce, learn tech, get inspired, and invest in ourselves. Whether you're brand new to learning Salesforce and starting from the beginning, or mid-career and skilling up for that new opportunity, we are your trail guides here to support you with an itinerary to help you get where you're going. You are in the right place. If you're new to our channel, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to click on that notification bell so you can be notified when we release a new video. In the description below, you will find links to everything we mentioned in this video, in addition to links that we find helpful, like useful items in our home offices. Let's go! In this Part 2 video, Zayne Turner is talking about JavaScript from a Salesforce point of view with information about Lightning Aura components. Zayne Turner leads the Architect Relations team at Salesforce. She and her team focus on engaging, empowering, and inspiring architects working with Salesforce technologies. Your quest, should you choose to take it, is to continue your journey through the adventure of learning JavaScript for Lightning Aura components. Your quest begins now.
So Zayne is a developer evangelist at Salesforce, and she loves to, there we go. She loves
all
to
the things.
And aspiring developers gain the knowledge, resources, and skills they need to solve their tough problems and build robust applications on the Salesforce platform. She's a proud coach for Red Women and a huge fan of WWDUG. And the story we don't tell that much is that before we were WWDUG, there were the three of us. We were the three musketeers. She's the other initial leader of WWDUG, and then Salesforce stole her. Salesforce stole her, and then we were all by ourselves. So we were left to our own devices. But luckily, she's become our Salesforce, our WWDUG guardian angel. She is completely always there for us. She's always there when we have questions and we want to bounce stuff off of someone. And she's the reason you got all those awesome Heroku Delios at Dreamforce. That was her. And so we are just so lucky to have her. And without further ado, and without me just talking the whole time, Zayne!
Hey! Yeah, so I'm really thrilled to be here. And yeah, especially because it was the three of us being like, hey, we should do a thing. And we actually hadn't even met, but we all had the same idea of this group should exist. And then we got the group to exist, as in the community team created the group. And then that was it. That's it. That was at the end of my involvement. And Jessica and Rachel actually built the group. So it's great that we're actually here now. And I'm going to share my screen now so that we can get started on Part 2. And let's see, I'm going to share everything. There we go. And can we see my slides? Yes, okay, cool. So before I dive in too much, I just do want to thank you all for being here. And I want to apologize because I also will sound probably like a motor and maybe cough. We'll do our best there. And I was finishing this demo because I kept changing my mind right up to the last minute. So we are going to have a great time together this evening. And if everything works, it'll be awesome. If not, we are going to do a lot of debugging together, which will be maybe even better. So this is the second part of our journey together into Lightning. And I'm not going to make any forward-looking statements, but if I were, just make sure you're making your purchasing decisions based on currently available technology. We're going to be looking at some Spring 18 stuff, but that's coming soon, so we should be good, right? So today, we are going to review a little bit of what we talked about last time, just to make sure we're all on the same page as far as terminology and a few other things. And then we're going to go deep into event handling in Lightning. What is that? What are events? What kind of events do we see? And then we're going to build out some Lightning components that are using a variety of events and talk about when we design components, when we're writing that code, what are the patterns we want to start thinking about. And then we're going to revisit a few brief next steps, and I'm sure that Jessica and Rachel will also have some last steps for you, and that will be our time. So who remembers, we can do this shout out or chat, especially now that I've figured out how to also see the chat. But who remembers what is Lightning from last time we talked? Yes, Tammy's on there with the framework. Liz, framework. We've got the UI. Yes, Susanna. Yes, framework. All right, anything else? Let me get out of the chat so I can animate. Yes, it is a framework. It's the UI, and then the one that everybody kind of forgets because it's not really as relevant to those of us that are building things is the fact that now it's this whole new area of functionality on the platform, and you can especially see it in places like the App Exchange, where you're starting to see those Lightning Bolt templates and Lightning component exchanges, all of those kinds of things. So, so it's a framework that is underlying the Lightning experience, the UI that you see, but because it's also this new framework, it's giving completely new functionality to the platform that wasn't there before. And part of the shift is the fact that this framework is a client-side framework, and we talked about the difference with Visualforce, but it's asking your browser to do more work, but in the end, it ends up feeling more intuitive for users. So this is why tonight, we're gonna pick up where we left off and talk about events, because when we're in the browser dealing with users much more intimately, shall we say, events become much more important. And for our purposes together, when we're talking about coding, I'm going to think of an event as something happening. Okay, that's what it's going to be. An event is something happened. And so what kind of events might exist in Lightning? And I will not make you guess. I will just show some. We have HTML events. Those are things like on click, and that link that you're going to get when the slide deck gets sent out will take you to the WW3 Schools article about HTML events. But those are things that are happening in the UI that pretty much all modern browsers can recognize. Somebody clicked on something, that's an on-click event. Somebody hovers over something with their cursor, that's an on-hover event. All of those kinds of things. You can get at those in Lightning. We can also get at controller.js events, and we looked at those a little bit last time we were together. And tonight we're also going to dive into helper.js events. So in our Lightning components, we have our controller.js is almost like our left brain, and our helper.js is like our right brain. We're going to go into why we have both and what they do. And then we have a whole variety of Lightning events, because we haven't used the word event enough, really. And there are two kinds of Lightning events to keep in mind, actually: component Lightning events and application Lightning events. And all of this is a little overwhelming. So how do you know what kind of event you're dealing with? How am I going to have to memorize all of this? And what you want to do is think about, if events are something that happened, then think about where did that something happen? Where did that thing begin? And that's going to help you think about what kind of event you might be dealing with, and then what kind of code you're going to need to write. So we're going to play a little game after that incredibly in-depth and technically amazing overview of events. We're going to play Name That Event, and the prize will be something to be determined. It will be fantastic. But are we ready? I can see fist pumps or something if we're on mute. Yes, okay, great. Okay, so you can either shout or type, anything you want, but something happened somewhere. I've got to actually get, something happened in the UI. Ah, Susanna's already in with HTML. We have Tammy saying HTML. Yes. Any others want to weigh in? What kind of event might this be? Something happened in the UI.
Like a click?
Yes, like a click. Click or a hover. Yes, I'm getting, actually, some people are already jumping ahead and being like, let me name the events that probably is. Yes, we are on point. That is an HTML event. Okay, something happened in the controller.js.
Like a trigger?
Or like, I remember we did the controller.js event. Like in last time we did the on init. Remember that do init event that when the component loaded, we wanted to be able to have some information show. So yes, we're getting that controller event. That is absolutely right. And I gotta get my slides together so that I can click on them. Sorry, everyone. Okay, that is a controller.js event, and we're gonna look at those. Something happened in the helper. Oh, we've caught on to the pattern now. Yes, that is a helper event. And the helper and controller events are also called functions. That's more properly their name in JavaScript. That may be why some people were kind of like, oh, what's going on? So controller.js events and helper.js events are functions. Oh, the game isn't over. We're getting into the tough round now. Something happened in a component somewhere in the component hierarchy. So you know how we can embed components within each other? We know that something happened somewhere in that hierarchy. What kind of event might that be? Liz is already getting the syntax of the, we're going to the Lightning framework. So we're on this. I'm seeing Lightning application, Lightning event. It is a kind of Lightning event. And this one is a little tricky. This is the component flavor of the Lightning events. This last one, something happened in another part of my application. It could be another component or somewhere else. There we go. Now we're getting it. Our application event, indeed. So I feel like we're getting the idea that when we think about events, think about where it's coming from. And that's going to help you know what kind of thing you're dealing with. So without further ado, let's get into building something together. And again, like last time, there is a bit.ly, that link there. I will also put it in the chat so that everyone can get to it if you want to follow along. It is going to have the code that I'm going to walk through tonight. That again, I was building up to the last minute, so hopefully it works exactly the way we want. But this is going to take us through our event playground. So let me get out of my slides and let's go ahead and get into the browser. And as you may remember, last time we were together, we were in this application. We were in the ZBS application and we built this Hello World component. But we want to talk about events. So let's dive in and put a new component on this page. So I'm going to go to the developer console. And let's go File, New, Lightning component. And again, if you want to try to type along, you can, or you can just watch. So I'm going to call this Event Playground. And I want to put it on application pages. So any idea what boxes I should check to put it on any page in my application? Yes, Tammy's in with Lightning page. That's what I'm going to check. So, and let me give a brief description. Let me be better about this. And we're going to say that this is a component showcasing a variety of Lightning framework events. We'll do some best practices here. Okay. So we have our component. We don't have much in it yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over to my gist, and let's go ahead and steal this first little bit of markup. Because what I want to do is I want to create a component that lets a user do something. That's where I'm going to start. So get to my developer console again. Okay, and let's not have too many Aura component tags, right? That's probably not going to be good. And I'll clean up my markup in the developer console so we can look at this all together. Okay. Yeah. The developer console and I are having a difference of opinion about formatting. Okay. So we have some markup here. I added one Lightning-based component of Lightning card. I added another one of Lightning button. It's a pretty simple little component. So I'm going to save it. And let's get it on the page and see what's happening. So I'm going to close my chat window, go to Setup, Edit Page. And here we go. Pretty great looking component, if I do say so myself. We'll save our changes and go back. Okay, I'm going to also open up my developer console so we can start seeing some things that happen. So now, any guesses as to what might happen when I click this button? What sorts of things would we hope we start seeing? Yeah, something with an HTML event, an on-click event. Yep, hopefully not a giant error. So let's see what happens. I'm going to click this button and nothing's happening. Let's go look at our component markup. And who can spot why nothing is happening? I want you to zero in on line 5. We were just talking about what kind of event that might be when I'm clicking. What's missing? Yes, as Susanna says, the event, the function, as Rita says, we're not doing anything with that event, right? We know that we want to capture an HTML event. We want to do something when the user touches a part of the UI. So we're going to be probably in the realm of an HTML event. And I want to use it within Lightning button. So when I want to know how to use a base Lightning component or to write something in Lightning, where do you go? What do you Google? What do you look up? Yeah, we look up SLDS. Where else do we go? The component reference, absolutely. We Google and we go look at Lightning Components Developer Guide, right? You'll see what I've been Googling for people lately. And we go here. And I dig through all of these things to try to get to the base components. Something I've been showing lately that I want to show you all here is in Spring, you don't have to do this anymore. I'm in my org. What I can do is take the first part of this URL right here. You see here this app innovation flow. And what I can do is I can go into a new part of my browser and paste in the first part of my URL and then just add component reference suite.home. And I'm going to put this in the chat because you're going to want to remember this string. Put this in the browser, hit enter, and as you can see, I'm taken to the Lightning Components library. And this is documentation about Lightning Components, and actually a ton more than you would think, but it's specific to your instance. So if I'm in a sandbox, it's my sandbox. If I'm in production, it's production. And what it's doing is it's pulling together components from all these different namespaces, like Force, Community, and Lightning that we talked about last time, all the ones Salesforce provides for you, as well as your own components. So we'll see this event playground that I just made. It's already showing up right here. And I have ways that I can add more documentation into it, which we're not going to talk about. But you can look at spring release notes, and actually the spring 18 webinar, we showed a little tiny snippet of it there. But the reason I'm bringing us here is because we wanted to know how to work with an on-click or an HTML event with a Lightning button. So I'm going to search for button right here, or not. I'm going to search for button, and we can see there's a whole bunch of different kinds of buttons. And when I click on Lightning button, I get markup. I can see exactly how to use it. I get controller functions that if I want to start wiring it up, I can do that. And I get, of course, just like the SLDS site, all the different variants that I can use if I want to make it look like different things. So we can see here also, if I click straight to specification, this is the part that you may be used to seeing with the documentation that will tell you all the different things that you can pass into or use on that base component. And a lot of times, these base components have a way for you to handle HTML events. Right here, we see we have an onClick. That is the HTML onClick event. So I'm going to go back into my developer console, and let's go ahead and add onClick. Oop. I'm going to save. So we have an onClick event now declared. And if I go back to my page and I refresh, now when I hit click me, we still see nothing is happening. So I've got myself wired up to handle when a user clicks. I can handle the HTML event, but if we look at my markup, what's missing? Yeah, exactly. So I've got the first part. I can handle the onClick event, but I'm not doing anything with it. The logic, the JavaScript, the function is actually missing. So let's pop open our, let's reopen our developer console because it froze, which it does sometimes. It's okay. And let's go to our brains. And where do we go when we want to deal with something in the component markup in JavaScript? What's the first layer that we go to? Yes. Awesome. As we said, we know that that's our left brain. So our first stop is our JavaScript controller. Okay. So I have an empty function here in my JavaScript controller. And from our last time, we talked about the special shape that these functions take. Does anyone remember what's a little different about the JavaScript that you'll find in Lightning components? Yes. Excellent. We remember it's in a name value pair, so it's a JSON object. Awesome. So let's jump over to our gist. And now let's go ahead and copy our controller.js markup real quick. And I'm going to replace what's in here with that. And then let's look at this function and see what's going on. All right. What do we notice about this function? What is it doing? Yep, we've got an alert going on. It writes to the log. It's logging something to the console. It's sending a message back. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to save it now. What arguments or parameters am I passing in? Yep, component. What else am I passing in? Event. Yep. And helper. Yes, I'm passing in three things: component, event, and helper. And in this case, what's the name of this function? Yeah. It's handle simple click. So if I go back into our component, what do I need to put now in my blank spot? What should I put there? Yeah, we're getting it C dot handle simple click. We're getting the curly bracket bang. Yes, awesome. Yes. So we're going to do curly bracket bang C dot handle simple click. And I'm going to save. And now when we go back into Salesforce and we refresh our page, and we click on our amazing clickable button, hey, we see two things happening. We see that console.log happening, and we see our window.alert. Yes, I want to applaud the typed oohs and ahs. Thank you. So let's go back to our code real quick. And in our controller, what do we know about console.log or window.alert? Are those things that Salesforce gives us? That's right. As Priyanka's saying, that's coming from that's not a Lightning thing. That's again part of this fact that Lightning is based on JavaScript. It's this modern browser-based language. So you can get at things, other parts of JavaScript, like those HTML events that your browser can handle. And then we can also do other things that your browser can handle, like writing to console.log or popping up window.alert. Yep. Now, do I want to send messages to my users about whether or not a record saved using window.alert? I like the hedging the bets of maybe. Yes. We want to not use that. We would want to use a proper modal pop-up. And I'm just mentioning that here because writing to things like console.log is pretty safe, but writing directly to like window.alert, some of these other things, objects that you can get at in JavaScript will make you sometimes run afoul of something called locker service, which is security in Lightning. And it's specifically meant to make sure that your components do what you want them to do. And that if someone tries to do something sneaky in some JavaScript, like writing something to window.alert to then log your keystrokes or turn on your camera, that can't happen. So writing to window.alert for major application functionality may not be the best long-term plan. There are ways to handle that in other components. And we'll look at those patterns tonight about how do I send one thing from one component to another. Okay, so returning to our example though, our playground isn't looking too bad, right? We have it, we can click it, we'll get a window pop up, we can write to the log, it's pretty great. So we know how to handle HTML events. What if I want to do something more than just pop this up? What if I want to keep track of a user clicking this button? Or if we look at things like this button right here, when I click follow, it knows that I've clicked it, and then I can click it again and it will unfollow. This kind of thing. What do we call it when something can track whether or not I've interacted with it? When it remembers something I've done. Any guesses? Yes, Tammy. It's state. That's exactly what it is. It's state. So being stateful. So often when users are interacting in Lightning, they like Lightning to act like it knows what it's doing. And a part of that is being stateful. So let's get stateful and let's add a new Lightning component on here. And I'm just going to copy the middle part. It's another base component that is very helpfully called Lightning button stateful. We'll jump into the developer console. Okay. And so now we can see our Lightning button stateful has places where I can add labels when it's not being clicked, when it has been clicked, when I hover over it, and I can even then give it icons, right? And what are we doing with line 14? What's this? What does VDOT mean? Okay, we're passing it back. We're getting the current state of the button. It's a yes, variable, yes. View, yep. Yes, those VDOTs mean something that's a variable in our component. And how do we declare variables in Lightning components? Yeah, absolutely. It's an OR attribute. So we got to go back to our gist and grab one more thing. I need to grab my OR attribute. So I'm going to pop it up here up top. Now I can save. So I have an attribute called button state, and it's a Boolean, which means it's true or false. I can toggle it on or off. And I'm tying it, so now we know that this state thing right here that is provided by this Lightning-based component, I'm linking it to my Boolean value that I created. And what is this right here? What is line 16? We just saw that in our other thing. Yep. It's an event. And what kind of event? Yeah, it's our on-click event. It's our HTML event. That's right. And we know, as Nikki said, that it is calling a controller event because what? What tells us that it's calling another one? That's right. That's C dot. And what's the name of the event that we want to call? Oh, I'm making y'all type. It's pretty evil. Yes. Yeah, we're going to do handle stateful click as opposed to simple click here. So when I go into my controller, where do I add the new functionality? Yeah, after the comma, under this other thing. We know it's our name value pairs, right? So I can collapse this, press enter, and I could put in handle stateful click, right? And then I want to declare it as a function because that's my value. And I'll finish the shape of my empty JSON object right here. So I have an empty function that I've just added. And I'm going to pass in some parameters again, right? So we'll pass in ability to see the component. And if I want to be able to see the HTML event, to get information about the event that fired this thing, what do I need to pass in? Yeah, that's exactly why it's there. And the helper, which means we could talk to the helper if we need to. All right, so let's go back to the gist and let's actually get the guts of what that should be. Grab it here, put it here, and now, all right. So what is this function doing? What is this controller action doing? Line 7 is looking at what? That's right. I'm declaring a variable called state. And as Susanna and Rita are saying, and Tammy's saying, we're going into our component and we're grabbing that button state attribute. And then down here, I'm assigning a value. And I'm saying, okay, and I want you to then set the value of button state to what does this do? What is that syntax doing? Yep. We're setting the value to the exact opposite. So that's how you toggle on and off. We're sort of cheating. If it comes in and it's true on line 7, when we get to line 8, what is it going to be? Awesome. So let's save this. Let's save our component markup. And now let's go see if I spelled everything right and see what happens back in our app. Okay, so we have our stateful button right here. And when I click it, what do we hope happens? We're sharp this evening. Yeah, and there we go. We can see off and on. And so it remembers, just like up here, they're the exact same thing. I wish my screen would shower confetti on us all right now. Okay, so we just handled HTML events. This stateful button, I should create an event for that. This one is just using HTML events to pop some stuff up. This button is taking an HTML event and then remembering it and changing the value of something in our component. It's acting statefully. So simple HTML firing, taking HTML and translating it into something I want my component to do. So in turn, firing a component event. Let's get even more complex. Let's see. Let's remember what I'm doing in my demo. Sorry, everybody. Okay, yes, this is what we want to get to. So this is all well and good if I'm just going to be dealing with this component right now. But we talked about things like we want to go talk to other parts of our application, or we want to be able to communicate up and down. If I'm embedding components inside each other, I want to be able to handle that. I also want to be able to do things like, I don't know, navigate to other records and do all those kinds of cool things. And to do those things, I'm going to have to start working with the capital L, capital E, Lightning events. So to do that, let's go ahead and declare a new Lightning event. That's going to be our first step with this next part of the demo. So let me close my tab so I stop getting confused. So we're going to go to the developer console. And so how do we declare events in Lightning? It's kind of a silly question. I'm in the developer console. How could I start doing that? Yeah, exactly. File, new, and the developer console helps you by giving you the option. This Lightning application, Lightning component, Lightning interface, Lightning event, Lightning tokens. The developer console has all of these different bundles ready for you to choose from. If I was in my IDE, like Visual Studio Code, I would have to remember the syntax a little differently. But for now, let's go ahead and declare it right here in the developer console. And I'm going to call it WWDUG event. And I'm probably not going to put the exclamation point in there. We'll put the exclamation point down here. There we go. And we'll submit this. All right. And now I'm going to zoom in up here. If I remember how. What is different about this event that we just declared, the syntax of it, versus, say, our component syntax? What do we already notice in terms of just naming the files? I'm zooming out now so I can see the chat. Yes, exactly. We have a new suffix, that .evt, and as Jennifer's pointing out, there's only one file. That is also a big difference. It is just this event file. It's not like our component in that we have lots and lots of files. So this Lightning event file is pretty simple. And right now, the developer console has already made a decision for me about what kind of event it should be. Anyone know what kind of event this is? If we have those two different Lightning events. Yep. And if I wanted to change it to be a component event, any guesses at what I should type? Yep, that's exactly right. I would change this to be component. But what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and leave it at the default as an application event, because an application event is going to give me more flexibility right now. When you're first developing an event, it's okay to start it as an application event, see where you're going to use it. And then if you start noticing that you're layering up too many of these events, you can start trying to then dial some of them back to component events and see if that works better for you. But for right now, I'm going to leave it an application event, and we'll see why in a minute. And now, right now, if I just save my event, this event has a name and nothing else. I want to be able to put stuff in my event. I want to be able to say send information in my event. So what I'm going to do here is get rid of this self-closing tag. And I'm going to open this up so that I can literally put stuff in here. So we're opening up the XML. And how do I declare variables? Anyone remember? Yeah, just like my component, I can just start typing aura attribute, and I can give it a name. I can have a data type. And just like that, I've added something to my component. And if I wanted to do more, I could just keep listing them. So this attribute, we're going to just call, go back to our gist. going to just copy really quick. I'm going to get the right name. We're going to call this show icon, and it's going to be a string. Yes, Nikki, I will. And I can actually show you more about that at the end if we have time, especially. And I can show you how I built this org as well. I will do that. There was a question about IDE and Lightning component development. So we have an OR attribute, its type is string, and I give it the name of show icon. Okay, it's pretty simple. So I have an event registered. Now, how do I use this event in my component? Anyone have an idea of what the next thing we need to do might be? Yeah. We need to register it in the component that we want to use it in. And registering lets us fire the event. It means the component that has the register in it is allowed to create that event. So let's go back to our gist, and we're going to grab our register event thing right here. And now you're going to see a place where, if you're following my gist, what you're doing is going to be different than the way the gist wants you to do it, because of something I did earlier today. So right here, I'm registering an event. And anyone tell me what Lightning event am I actually registering on line 4? Yes, as Tammy says, it's the surprise me event. And how do we know that it might be the surprise me event? Yep. Yes, it's both the type attribute right here, which we know just like on our OR attribute, that gives us a data type. With the register event, its type is surprise me event. And if that wasn't enough, this C:, it's a new syntax that we haven't seen before, but C:, means, just like if I'm going to say embed another Lightning component, this is how I get at custom Lightning things that I've built. And in this case, this is my Lightning event. So this is, please embed an instance of my Lightning event here. Now, I didn't call my event right here, surprise me event. Any guesses as to why I didn't do that? Don't worry about it too long. The answer is not a good one. It's the, sorry, I had a fire alarm right before the demo and I didn't get to clean up my demo org. So let me open up the surprise me event that I already defined, but I didn't want to just open it up. I wanted to walk through creating it with you. And now let's look at this event. And what can you tell me about this event? What do we know about this surprise me event? Yep, it's an application event. Does it have any information that it can pass? Yep, it's got one attribute. And the data type is, yes, a string. We're on it. So it's the exact identical twin of the one we created together. But I can't save two events with the same name in the same namespace, because how would my application know which surprise me event to fire? So it was just because I needed to be able to save a new event, so I had to give it a new name. So I'm going to close out that one, and we'll just leave it surprise me so that our gist behaves nicely. If I wanted to change it to the other event we just declared, what would I do on line 4? If I wanted to use the other event, what would I change? Yeah, that's exactly right. I would change the type and change the type name, and we would just substitute that new one in. And that's all we'd have to do. Now this name right here, we're going to use this in our controller markup. So that's why it's a little confusing. The data type is our Lightning application event. And the name I choose here, we're going to see show up in our controller and helper syntax. So we have the ability to register the event. Any guesses as to what we might need to do now to do more with this event? Yeah, we need to attach it to something, refer to it somewhere. This is the pattern we're now seeing. We have the ability to fire it, but we're not using it anywhere at all. So I'm going to go back into my gist, and I have another base Lightning component, and I'm betting by now you're seeing a pattern or a theme to how we're using base Lightning components tonight. Clean it up so that we can see it. All right. I have now this much bigger Lightning button group that we can see that actually contains 4 individual buttons, okay? And what else do we know about these 4 individual buttons? Yep, they call events, they all fire the same event. That's right. And how could a user fire that event? That's right. We're handling that same on-click event. So we're not moving much far beyond our favorite HTML event. So I'm going to save this real quick. And I'm going to go back in and show you now what happens when I click on it, when I'm going to refresh the page, and what happens when I click. I'm sure we all are already aware of what's probably going to happen when I click here. And I just want to show this again so that we get used to seeing. This is how the Lightning framework is going to start referring to these kinds of things. What's the problem here? What did I not do? That's absolutely right. We're already on it. And it's telling us explicitly right here. It's an unknown controller action, and then it's giving me the name that it was expecting, that it didn't find. So we'll go back, we'll grab that code really quickly, copy it, go back into the dev console, get into our controller. All right. And now, what do we know about this new function that I've added to the controller? What are we seeing? Yep, absolutely. We're zeroing in on that. We're finally to the helper. It's also doing something interesting on line 11. What does it look, what is line 11 working with? That's right. And what kind of event, what type of event are we working with on line 11, if we will remember? That's right, that's our HTML event. And if I'm going to go back into my component markup, this is a list of things, right? There are lots of buttons within this button group, and they are all handling this same event. So if we go back into our controller, what are we doing right here? What are we grabbing? That's right, we're grabbing the label. So just like we saw up here, where I can reach into the component and I can get my Aura attributes, because I passed in the event, I can get information about my event. And it's because I filled out a label, now we're going to start seeing different information coming in based on what someone actually clicked. So the double quotes and single quotes are actually all good. Yes, it's my fast typing and being messy that I am not following. It's a better practice to have double quotes all the way through. You're going to find the places where single quotes don't behave nicely are It's rare. Double quotes are better practice. Okay, so we are reaching into our event. We're getting the source of that event, so the button, the thing that the person clicked, and we're getting the label. And again, V stands for, do we remember? Yes, and I gave you lots of reasons to remember that it might be variable or view, and I'm going to type it into the chat window because this is the actual technical musty name that it is. V stands for value provider, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but when you see this V, just think something in my component markup. It's either going to be an Aura attribute or it's this label part of our Lightning button because it is a part of the view, which is our component markup, which is the value provider. If we didn't have enough V's throwing at you. So yes, I just wanted to point that out because it could be confusing. If you're used to seeing this V and immediately thinking the only thing it can be is an Aura attribute, I didn't want you getting confused looking at the code and wondering why this works. Okay, so we're going to grab the label. We're writing it to the console. And then what are we doing here aside from invoking the helper? Tell me more about what this looks like. What are we doing? Yep, we're calling a specific method in the helper. And what are we sending over to the helper? That's right, we're sending context about the event. There's information that we're sending into the helper. So let's go grab our helper code right here. And I'm gonna pop into the helper right here. We'll replace this and save. All right, and what are we noticing about the helper? Yes, right on, Rita, exactly. It's the same shape. It is still name value pair. I do not have to write anything differently just because I'm in the helper. I still have a name. What's the name of my function? That's right. And I'm defining that it is a function, and I'm saying that it has access to something called event. Luckily, that's also what I'm passing. It's neat how that works. And now I'm declaring a variable, and I am doing something here. Any ideas? What is going on line 3? What are we doing? What are we noticing? We're seeing there's definitely something going on with an action. So while the rest of you are thinking about what you noticed there, Nikki had a question about, do controller functions get all 3 parameters and the helper just 1? And the answer is no. So I could pass on more things if I wanted to. I could pass also reference to the component here. That's fine. I probably wouldn't want to pass helper because we're already in the helper. So I could pass component event, I could pass strings, other variables. You have flexibility here, but I wanted to pass the event. So yep, that's a great question, Nikki. Okay, yay! Thank you all for continuing to think about the challenge I threw you. Yes, so on line 3, we are reaching into the Aura framework. That is what this $A means, which is our global variable that means the larger Lightning framework. So I'm saying, hey, larger Lightning framework, I need something that has this name. And what do we recognize about this name? Yes, as Tammy says, it's the event we defined. It is our lightning event. It's our surprise me event. And this E dot syntax means it's an event. That's all. So I'm saying, hey, Aura Framework, I need you to go get me an event that I defined called surprise me. And I'm setting it to as a variable called surprise event. And now what am I doing on line 4? I have an instance of my surprise me event, and we're doing what? That's right. We're adding the parameter, we're setting a parameter, because we declared our event to be able to take in and pass along and work with an attribute. And we gave it a name of show icon. So I'm saying, hey, please set the value of that attribute I declared, that show icon. And what do we know about this? What's that? That's exactly it. We're getting the exact label of the button that somebody clicked. Cool. Susanna, I'm going to circle back to your question because that is the question. But let's look at the rest of this event really quickly. Where are we actually firing the event? Yes, line 6. And is this asynchronous or synchronous? That was a trick question. Yes, it is yes, exactly. It is we're doing it right now, but JavaScript doesn't fire the exact way that we all remember. So that fire event is happening in real time. We are literally firing that event right there when we hit line 6. And I'm going to save this and go back into the UI and show you, and then we're going to circle back to the question that Susanna put in. So I'm going to refresh my page. And now when we click this, what are we noticing happening? Yeah, the console.log is lighting up. Awesome. So we know that we're getting it right, and we know that we can create an application event. Awesome. Now let's jump back into our code and let's actually look at why did we separate this out? In this case, the reason that we separated it out wasn't any physical limit. There was no specific, oh, we have to do it because if you put all this logic, if I just copied and pasted from here into my controller, it would work just fine. But I want you to notice how big our controller is getting, right? It's not that big right now, but let me go ahead and paste in all of this thing right here. And what I'll do is I'll just comment this out so we can go back to it. And now we can see that our controller is getting pretty big for a component that if we look at it in the UI, it's getting a little crowded in here. It's not that much going on. So a component that's getting really complex, that has many more things we need to interact with, if we started, get to my developer console, if we started jamming everything in the controller, the first problem is our controller starts getting really verbose and really unwieldy. And because your controller is your intermediary between your component and other things, when I want to actually handle an on-click event, I have to go to my controller. I can't skip to my helper. It's a best practice to keep your controller as readable and as tight as possible. So what I do here is I just decided to go ahead and put it in the helper because that is the best practice. The other reason that I want to put this in the helper, you may want to put something in the helper. I'm going to jump into my helper and let's do another one of we're going to, here, Nikki, this, as the excellent question you asked, we're going to pass another parameter in here, and we're going to get, I'm declaring a variable of button state, and I want to get my OR attribute of, for that stateful button, that button that we can click on and off. Any ideas how I should finish this? What do I start? How do I do that? We've got get, we're getting some getters. Now this is another thing of where I need to think about where it lives. I want to get it from the component markup. It's not from the Lightning framework, it's from my component. So what do I use to get at things in my component? Yeah, we're seeing, exactly. We're seeing it. So we're starting to see, here we go. And this is the full thing we want to do because I'm passing in the ability to see the component. So I'm going to use a component get. This is how I'm going to get at things in my component. And let me jump back to the markup real quick. It's called button state. So I'm going to complete this by just putting v.button state. So the question about the, could I still use the a.get? No, actually, so the a.get isn't going to help me. It's actually pointing in the wrong direction. Because this v button state only lives on my component. It doesn't live globally. My surprise me event does live globally, because if we go look at it, it's its own bundle. So that's why we have to point outside. Go back to my helper. Okay. And let's go back in real quick. So that's a good question. What happens when the helper gets really, really big? That's another place where you'll want to start looking at your design and thinking about, am I jamming too many components in here? So for us tonight, actually, let's look at our screen. I have one component with all these different buttons in it. Probably a more modular way to design it would be to have this button be a component, and this button be a component, and this be a component. That's why thinking small about your components helps. And that's why it's awesome that then components can embed within one another, because I could leave my big, awesome event handling widget component alone, but instead of having all of this Lightning base component markup just hanging out here, making this bigger and bigger and bigger, I would just have 3 little component references. And each of those smaller component references could then have a smaller controller and a smaller helper. So I'm going to finish my little off in the wild here. Does anyone remember, how do I set, if we used component get to go get attribute values, how do I set something in the component? Yeah, we got it. Component, if I can spell, component.set. And I'm going to do v.buttonState. And how do I set it to the opposite? Anyone remember? Yeah. So we're doing opposite. So what is this function that I just did, this toggle button? What am I doing here? Yeah, I'm just flipping the state. So let's go back to our controller. And this is why I did this. What other function does the exact same thing? Yes, handle stateful click, right? So what if I, for some reason, want to, when somebody clicks this button, one of these 1, 2, 3, 4, I want this thing to always be off. We can't have this on at the same time. So I don't want this, I don't want somebody to be able to click that on plus then click these things, okay? How do I then toggle this thing off? Just looking at my controller, what I already wrote. What should I do on line 15? What will we type? Yeah. I could just type handle stateful click, right? And let me go back into my page and refresh. Turn this on. And now, oops. Yes, as Nikki's already hinting at, something in the controller getting called from the controller, and now we're seeing that this thing is not defined and what's going on, and I'm getting an error, but it is defined because I defined it. When I go back into the developer console, because the controller is an intermediary between your component and so many other things, you cannot call, it would be too easy because of the way that JavaScript executes. JavaScript doesn't wait for you, it just goes. It is not like Apex and having a more orderly state. If we let you call into other parts of your controller from within this thing, you could get into a very nasty regression pattern very quickly. So you cannot call methods across in your controller. I cannot call anything else in my controller. I can work with one controller method at a time. So if I need to do more than one thing, I need to go ahead and use my helper. So that's another reason to put things in the helper, to keep your controller readable, but then also you cannot fire multiple functions all while staying in the controller. So anyone remember what I called my helper function? I'll jump back. I don't remember either. I actually was looking. Toggle button, yay! Okay, so let's go back. So we'll call it helper toggle button, and let's pass it the ability to get at things in the component and the event. We'll save. And now let's hope that my freehand hack does exactly what we want it to. So we're gonna have the state here. There we go. And actually, oopsie, I need to do more refactoring because what are we seeing? It's truly toggling the state. So if I wanted it to only turn it off, I would need to do some more refactoring. But you get the idea. Exactly, I do need an if, Nikki. That is precisely it. So now we're seeing a few reasons why we want to go ahead and use the left brain and the right brain. We have to first reach into our controller, but then we do want to offload as much other computing into the helper as we can. Because then also if I refactor and for some reason, maybe I don't want to have simple click and stateful click and surprise click. Maybe I've gotten complaints about all these stupid click function names and our developers just want to be able to handle click. We have one event that we fire on click, it's called handle click, and I need to know then if it's the one that should pop up the console.log and the window.alert, or the one that should toggle the button, or the one that fires this lightning event. Putting things in my helper from the first place means I don't have to do as much refactoring anyway. If the logic was living in my helper, then if I reduce down my controller, that's cool. I can call multiple helper functions anyway. They can live wherever. Okay. So now we've registered a lightning event. We're handling it. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this because I don't want to have too many fireworks going off in the minute. Now I want to catch that event, work with that event in another component. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and create another Lightning component. I'm going to go back into my developer console, and I'm going to go new Lightning component. Oops, sorry. And let's call this magic icon. All right, so we'll submit this, save it, and replace the markup. All right, what are we noticing about this component? Just off the bat, what are we already noticing about it? Yep, it's just got a simple div. There's just one thing. We can put it on pages. There's one attribute, absolutely. Yeah, yep, we're using a flexi page interface. We can use all pages, yes. Yeah, exactly. It's available for all page types. And I'm using one Lightning base component. Anyone know which one am I using? Yeah, we're using an icon. So let's go ahead, let's get this on the page. We'll go ahead and edit our page. Let's go ahead and collapse this. And now we can see we have our magic icon. And there it is. Ta-da! It's gorgeous. Let's go ahead and save it. Go back. I mean, this is probably the most exciting component I've shown you so far. I know. But we have an icon here. So now I want to make this component react to when somebody hits 1, 2, 3 or reset. I want these two to talk to each other. So let's go back into our markup for our new icon component. And what do I need to do here? What do we think we need to do here? Yeah, we're working with events. I need it to be able to work with an event. So I did Aura register event to be able to fire an event. And in order to handle an event, I need to do an Aura handler. And I'm going to give it a name. We'll call it, I could call it button event if I wanted. I'll just do that. And now I have to say what event I want to handle. And any idea what I put here? What kind of event do we want to handle? That's right, it's our component event. It's the one we defined. So C colon, let me jump. It's, haha. There's so many kinds of events. What is the application event that we declared? Remember the name of that? You could cheat and look at the gist. Yes, it's our surprise me event. We want to handle the surprise me event. This is just like when we had to set up the bridge between our Lightning component and the server by saying what exact Apex class we wanted to use. When I use Aura handler, I need to say what exact event I can handle here. And this is because Aura handler is specific to custom Lightning events, those custom application events or component events. You wouldn't use an Aura handler for an on-click event because where can I get it on-click events? Yeah, it's happening in the browser. I can get at it in other places. I could say something in straight up HTML. I could use an on-click event in my HTML markup. I can use an on-click event in my base component XML markup. So I can do on-click events in my component markup itself. I don't have to use an aura handler, but I have to use an aura handler if the thing I'm dealing with, the thing that is happening that I want to interact with, is an application or a component event, a custom one that I've defined. So let's go ahead and pop over to our gist. Ooh. All right. And you can see here that, again, I got the syntax kind of wrong. That's why I went back to the gist. I'm not going to lie, I kind of always screw that up. Let's go back to the developer console and fix it. I'll paste them side by side so you can see what it is I did wrong. Okay. So what did I do wrong? I gave it there is a name attribute that you can have, but I didn't need it. And the event syntax is right, but I did forget something. That's exactly right, Tammy. That's what I forgot. I forgot to fire some kind of an event. So let's go ahead and keep our better syntax. So now we know we're going to be able to handle the surprise me event. And what action are we firing? What is this thing here? Where does that live? That's right, it's in our controller. It lives on the component and it is in our controller file. That's right. We are back to being no longer out in the space of an application event. This is something that should be living here. So let's go ahead and grab that code right here. And now, at long last, we have some if statements. I know we've been waiting for them. We're finally having some complex logic. And what are we doing here? Let's look at this function. What are we noticing about this function here? What am I doing on line 4? What do we notice? Yeah, Pavana, that overall we are changing the icon based on the button pressed, but on line 4, we are getting the value of show icon. And what is show icon? If I'm looking at my Lightning event, my Lightning application event, what is show icon? Yeah, it's a string, it's my attribute. So this is me reaching into the event and getting a parameter named show icon. So what kind of event are we dealing with on line 4? Yeah, it's our application event. So because the event is an application event, the one that I'm passing in from my component, this is the method I use to grab the information that's in there. And I'm going to flip back real quick to my playground helper so you could see. I used set param to send information, and I could use set params with an S to send more than one thing if I had more than one attribute. And on the other side, the mirror image is get param. And I can reach in and get it by name. So now I'm setting that to a variable called icon choice and printing that to the debug log so that I can see what it is. And then I'm doing some comparisons. And I'm saying if the information coming in is equal to something, it's a string, so I have some strings here, then I want you to, what is this pattern? We've seen this before. What are we doing with component.set? That's right, we're passing it back to the component. We're setting a value. That's right, we're setting the value of something that is v.icon name. And I'm giving a specific string here. I'm hard coding. That's okay. It's a demo. And if we go look at our component, we can see that it's an aura attribute. Okay, so I'm going to save everything because we've done a lot of typing. And now we're going to go back into the UI. And I'm going to open up my console a little more. We'll clear it out because it's going to be fairly exciting with all the different things we're writing to it. And let's see what happens when I click. Oh, I covered up my other component. Hey, let's do the ta-da moment again. What? What? That's right. That's our ta-da. Ha! We'll leave it on the red one. So if you can see on our gist here, that is the end of the code that we're covering tonight. And I'm going to hop back into the slides real quick because we covered a lot. So as you can see, that gist is yours. You can go back into it as you want, but we covered, I'm going to go back because I don't think I did this. We covered how to handle HTML events. We talked about controller.js and helper.js and why you may want to use one thing in one file and one thing in another. And we built an application event. I did not get into a component event because that gets more into communicating up and down the component hierarchy, which could maybe be something we talk about in a future session together somewhere in the world. Yeah, where we talk about communicating events up and down component hierarchies, which gets very complex.
So what's here for later?
Part 3?
Right, part 3. Okay, I have to get out of the nightmare of 500 click slides. We can talk. We can talk. Okay, so I'm so bad at slides right now, y'all. I'm so sorry. The next, plus, because especially all I want to do is just say, what's next? Maybe part 3 could be us together at Trailhead DX talking about this stuff. I'm definitely going to be there. I hope to see some of you there. And if not, I know we're going to be broadcasting from Trailhead DX. So join a global gathering or join one of the watch parties online so that you can see what we're up to. And I have updated the trail mix. So if you've been doing the trail mix, there are new things on it, and I will keep adding a couple things onto it. But I added 2 projects that take into account these more advanced design patterns and talk about some of the things that we talked about tonight. So keep going on the trail mix as you do your 100 days of code. And now let's talk about your questions. And I'm going to share my face instead of my screen. Oh, actually, and while we're doing that, I will call it my IDE. So let's talk about IDEs. What IDEs do people use right now? People are using Sublime, Illuminated Cloud, Eclipse. What do I need to do? Eclipse or Maven's Mate. Yeah, so Eclipse, let's see, I am using, it's a new one. Oh, hey, Cody. Okay, I am using, let's see, I will share my screen again. And this is not necessarily an endorsement. This is just the one I've been forcing myself to use because I was a Maven's Mate user and a Sublime Text fan. Eclipse, I have not used in a while. I tried to go back to it, but it's was never my favorite, I will be honest. And I've been working a lot with Salesforce DX. And so as a part of working with Salesforce DX and making myself adopt those tools, I've actually been using Visual Studio Code. And I know that several of the ones yes, it is sad that Maven's mate is retired. Joe Ferraro did a great job maintaining it for the community. And it's too bad we couldn't just, get him to do that forever only. But I've been using Visual Studio Code because there is a plugin for Salesforce DX. I know that there are also plugins, I think, for Illuminated Cloud as well. So that's definitely an IDE you could check out if you're already comfortable with it. And let me share as I said, I would share my screen. So let me show you a little bit about Visual Studio Code and DX especially. So as we can see, this is just a blank window in Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to go ahead and open up a project. And I will, in fact, open up the project that I used for our time together here. It's called ZBS. And so now what we're looking at is just the basic file shape here. And this shape is specific to Salesforce DX projects. And this sounds like a shameless plug. It's not meant to be. This is just coincidental. We have the first part of a 5-part series about using Salesforce DX go live on the developer website today. Next week, you should be seeing part 2, and then every week after throughout February leading up to Trailhead DX. And that's between the Salesforce Evangelism team as well as the Salesforce DX team are creating that series to help you think about, well, what is DX in the first place and how can I get started? And the reason I bring it up is that part 3 of that series is going to go deeper into this structure that we're seeing right here, this project structure. But let's actually get into something so that we can just start seeing something about our IDE light up. So I can see already here in my Aura folder, which is my Lightning Components folder, I have a couple different components, and I can see all the files that are involved in those bundles right here. And if I open up something like an indicator badge, that's cool. There's my code right here. It looks pretty similar to any other kind of IDE. But the cool thing about Visual Studio Code, especially with Salesforce DX, is if I do something like, I'll just get rid of this space, we can already see that it's telling me I've changed something. If I could decide to stage this change to source control, if I added another Aura attribute right here, something more material. My attribute, and its type will be string. And I save it locally. We can see now that Visual Studio Code is also telling me, hey, you may want to push this up to GitHub. This is connecting up to GitHub. And it's because of Salesforce DX underneath. And let me show you how I can get at that. Even from inside Visual Studio Code, I can open up right here, this integrated terminal gets me to the CLI. On a Mac, that's a terminal window, this application right here. I could type directly in it if I wanted to, some sort of lovely command here. Force org list is one of my favorite commands. So I'm in my terminal window and I'm executing a command that's going to show me different orgs that I'm working with. And so up here I can see these are orgs that could be a production org, could be a sandbox. These are, or a developer org. That's what's up here under this orgs file on the top. And then down below we can see we have this thing called Scratch org. And Scratch orgs are something that is specific to Salesforce DX functionality. And they're temporary orgs that you can use to build and test changes. They don't last forever. And the org that we were working in together tonight that I was showing you, that was a Scratch org. That's what that was. And it was in fact my default org right here, the www.dg org is right there. And so that command that I just ran in my terminal, I can run it right here if I wanted to. I could also do other things like push this back up to source control. All kinds of things. We see it's the same exact output right here. So I'm going to go back to the chat window because I couldn't see it while I was talking. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry that terminal didn't come up, but you saw the command. So I should have done the sharing my entire screen. Oh, there we go. There's my terminal. Ta-da. All right, now I will stop sharing. Okay. Yes, you can use this IDE without DX. Visual Studio Code is a full-on IDE all on its own. DX is actually just a plugin that I installed. Yep. I have not worked with Blue Canvas yet. If there's more information you could send me about that, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And with that, we're at the end. Are you already building Lightning Aura components? What recommendations would you give to people who are learning this skill? Comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've made it to this point, we want to take an opportunity to thank you. Since you've stayed with us, here's a bonus. As you continue your journey into learning JavaScript, we recommend MDN web docs. They are up to date and cover a large spectrum of information. When you start working with JavaScript, you will likely consult documentation often. The MDN web docs are great resources to get a deeper understanding of JavaScript standard objects, expressions and operators, statements and declarations, and functions. These resources also include references for client-side web APIs, JavaScript frameworks, and much more. Thank you for spending time with us. Make sure you like this video. It helps a lot. Click subscribe and on the notification bell so you never miss another video. We also handpick these videos which we recommend you watch next. You can talk to us on our Instagram, Twitter, on our website at 100daysoftrailhead.com, all of which are listed below. Thank you for learning with us, and we'll see you back tomorrow.